Funkmiller quite a bit just because I know they're usually going to have what I want, and if I put it in with a big order, it's not going to cost me a fortune in postage. So I find with some of the other ones, they'll add extra postage on if you add more than 30 kilos worth, which is makes the pricing on.
Yeah, I'm going to be buying 2 sacks of grain anyway. So
yeah, stuff like the home brew company, it's not. Pricing isn't as attractive once you realise they're going to charge you for each bag that they send, sort of thing. So
bit of a false economy, right?
Brew Day don't have a very big range, but they're quite reasonably priced. They got most of the crisp stuff.
Right, somebody have a look at the live stream and tell me whether or not it's really, really crap.
Hold on.
Yeah, hold on. Do I want some Maris water?
It's episode 55, by the way.
It is episode 55.
Is it?
It is. It's even in the notes. Ah.
Well, that's that edited then.
The stream looks okay to me.
Okay or good?
Well, it doesn't seem to be skipping around. Audio's coming through.
Okay.
Anyone who is watching live already, such as Just, do let us know if there's any issues.
Just
finding out a couple of technical problems at the moment.
Yeah, the problem is I changed to a different computer, so yeah.
I mean, it's never usually anything to do with Chris fucking about with his PC.
Crew Wolf is in the house.
Nah, man.
Evening, Mark.
How's Mark doing? Long time no speak.
Yeah, it seems like everything's all right, according to the chat.
Okay, let's see what happens when I fucking start Audacity, whether everything crashes.
Let's have a go.
Okay, gentlemen, Audacity, you ready? 3.
Oh, hang on. What? We're pressing record?
Yeah.
Ooh,
I want to see if my PC
I thought you were
crashes.
just about to switch it on.
No.
All right.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, click. Okay, nothing's dead yet.
Has the sky fallen in?
Not just yet, but you give it
is
time.
Wakefield on fire yet?
Give it time. Right, I've dropped 37 frames at the beginning. I've got a solid 10k on my 10 meg on my upload now. Can everybody hear me okay? Is mic volume good? Yep. Right, then let's do this because I've got a feeling this is going to turn into a proper sack of shit the further down the road we go. Volume up, Owen.
Have you done your makeup? Have you done your makeup, Chris?
Yeah, so somebody else do the intro because I'm going to go and get a beer.
Oof.
I need
Tricky.
a beer.
You want to lead us out?
Yeah, what we doing?
Podcast, mate, about summer.
Podcast 55.
I'll wait for Chris to
live stream.
I'll wait for Chris to sit back down. Oh yeah, so it is. Hang on, let me just make sure I've got all my windows open that I need open.
As you can tell tonight, gentlemen, we're properly organised.
As always.
Yeah, well, we had a curveball. We had some technical Chris PC issues.
I don't know why you guys make it seem like my PC is always the issue.
I'm not sure that's quite what we were saying, Chris. I think you're doing the heavy lifting on the technical front. Sometimes there's problems. It's complex.
It is. I need to build a new PC.
Right, shall I kick us off then?
Yeah, let's
You
go.
do it, man.
Right, cool. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 55 of the Hop Edition. Tonight we are going to be discussing the Kolsch or Kolsch. Have we decided how we actually pronounce that?
Kolsch.
Kolsch. So, yeah, we're looking at Kolsch style. What are the kind of key components of it? How it's made, how you can brew it at home, and what our personal kind of experience and tips would be for making a really good Kolsch beer. So, just got to say thank you to our sponsors and Patreons first of all. So, obviously, big thanks to Brewkeg Tap, our commercial sponsor, and to all of our Patreons who continue to support the pod. Remember, do make sure you follow us on the Facebook page and the other socials so that you can keep up to date with when we are going to do live pods like this one, and also anything else that's going on in the world of the Hop Edition. So, yeah, let's get into Kolsch.
Kolsch.
Let's do it. Let's get some Kolsch down on X. I am not pronouncing it the German way for the entirety of the podcast. Oh, you know what I haven't done? You know what I haven't done? Amateur hour. I swear to God, I apologize, guys. I didn't turn on my lights so you can see my beautiful face.
No.
Jesus.
I mean, I've
know.
got to turn another light off as well. Give me a sec.
I think I preferred the mood lighting. Personally.
Yeah, for you. There we go.
Yeah.
See,
probably...
I normally do all this before I have to like sort out the 11 fans that I've currently got.
Oh no, turn it off, Chris. Turn it off.
So can I go first with what I'm drinking?
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah, I'm drinking a Kolsch.
Well, I'm glad somebody's actually got a Kolsch to be drinking, because I think we've had previous episodes where it's been like, yeah, we're going to talk about this beer, and nobody's had anything even remotely close to it.
Now, one thing I will say about this particular beer is, yes, it is a Kolsch style beer, although technically we're not in the EU anymore, so this is a legit Kolsch, because we don't have to abide by the area thing, whatever it's called. What's it called? Where we go?
Chris, you're in danger of sounding like a Brexiteer right now.
Protected geographical indicator. Look, I didn't vote for it, but I'm going to embrace some parts of it. So I don't have to abide by that because I'm not in the EU anymore. So I can make a Kolsch beer at home. And I have to say, you'll find out later on in the episode that it's not legit. There's no Stanger, right? And it wasn't served in, the specific platter from a Krantz, but it's a legit Kolsch recipe brewed with a legit Kolsch yeast, and it tastes absolutely stunning. I have to say, I'm really, really impressed with this. It's a very, very, very pleasant beer.
What yeast did you use, Chris?
Volume, Owen.
What yeast did you use?
I used OYL Omega's Kolsch 1. I didn't use Kolsch 2. I used the Kolsch 1. And it dropped clear. There's no gelatin. This dropped clear. This dropped clear in exactly 11 days after I put it in the keg.
Yeah, that was absolutely crystal clear.
And I would just like to say to Tricky, just because you don't know or you didn't see an announcement that I was brewing, I have been brewing. I have been brewing quite a lot recently.
I was confused. I was like, "Where's this Kolsch magically appeared from?"
I know. Chris is getting sensitive about people leveling, accusations that he doesn't brew very often, and which is fair. That's fair.
I just don't have the time to be jumping on streams and chat and stuff when I'm brewing these days because life's really hectic.
There you go. He's a more modest brewer.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to tell the world.
It's all right. You don't have to keep me updated on every brew, Chris. It's fine.
But you'd appreciate it if I did, though, right?
Well, no, I'd rather you just send me some of it to drink. But that's
I will.
Story, right?
I will. I've just had the house rewired, man.
I don't really care when you brewed it, but if you can send me some beer mail,
get that beer mail out.
I will send some out.
You sorted the loft out. Come on. You must have found all those bottles, right?
I did. I found 250 brown plastic bottles still in boxes sealed.
Perfect.
Yeah,
you don't even have to clean them.
I bought 100, put them in the loft, forgot about them. Bought another 100, put them in the loft, forgot about them. Then bought 50. Then the house got rewired, so I had to take everything out of the loft and put it in the shed. And I'm like, well, why is there 250 brown plastic bottles in the shed now? I should probably send out some beer mail.
That's going to be a lot of beer mail.
Well, it probably won't be, but yeah, it should be. So, yeah, there we go.
Awesome. I am on a American Pale Ale that I've brewed with lots of Nelson Sauvin in it. Yeah, so it's not even remotely Kolsch-like, but I haven't got a Kolsch that I've brewed or any commercial version, so unfortunately I can't partake this evening. But I thought I'd go with this one because all my other kegs seem to have decided to kick in unison this week. So the Yakima Chief Nipa and my Hellers, which probably would have been the closest thing to a Kolsch that I had on, both gone. And this is one of the only ones left at the minute, but it's really nice. So I'm not too upset that I've been forced into drinking this one. The Nelson is absolutely smashing out the glass aroma-wise off of this, and it's got a sort of base hopping of like Centennial and Columbus, and what else is in there? I think that might be it. Mainly Centennial, Columbus, and the Nelson. So it's got kind of traditional APA base, but then with a big whack of Nelson at the end, and just gives it really nice kind of sweet, grapefruity, grapey kind of bit of that. Sort of slightly wine-like character from the Nelson, but in a really nice kind of aromatic way rather than too kind of dry and tannic like it can get sometimes. So quite pleased with this one. It's very easy drinking.
Sounds lush.
That's what you want.
It's all right. I'm loving that Nelson. I'll be really upset when the bag of it I've got comes to an end. I think there's only about 150 grams left now. So
yeah,
we better get some more ordered then, aren't you?
Yeah, I know, but I've got that thing now. I think it'll be the next crop now, and it'll be bound to be shit compared to the last one. But
yeah, that's always that worry, right?
And also, I don't really want to be buying any more kilo bags, so I know I'll end up getting a kilo bag of it. And I just really, really, really need to work my way through the hops that I've got already.
Yeah. So I'm in the same place with my hops. So I'm like, right, I'm just going to need to work through what I've got.
Yeah, stop fucking buying stuff that
Just stop buying. Like, I don't need 8 kilos of hops. I mean, variety is good, but I mean, I've tried to remain relatively restrained. But the kilo bags are a little bit excessive unless you're like really into a hop. Like I would say for me, Citra Mosaic, I like good kilo hop options, right?
I know I'll get through those eventually.
Maybe something like Nelson, like something you really love and it's great, then go for it. But I just don't think a kilo of, I don't know, El Dorado is really worth buying.
Well, the rate that I've been going through this Nelson batch, I wish I had got a full kilo of it. I split the bag with somebody at the brew club, so I had 500 grams of it, and it's gone pretty quick. And Citra Mosaic, that's like one that I can have on a rolling order of a kilo because I know I will work through that as well. Yeah. And then there's the stuff like the kilo bag of Columbus I bought about 3 years ago that I'm still working my way through, and there's about 700 grams of it left. So,
well, that was a bold move.
Yeah. Don't know what I was thinking with that one.
Well, just future proofing. Okay.
I mean, it's not that it's something that I don't use a lot, because I do tend to put it into a lot of beers like this, APAs and stuff like that, but it's never in like the quantities that you would use it something like a Citra or Mosaic, because if you did, it would just taste pretty horrific. Columbus is definitely a supporting or bittering hop for me, not something that wants to be right up front, because it's very it's a bit raw. It's a bit dank and raw.
Quite aggressive, right?
Yeah.
I have to say that my hop choices recently have been very much using up what I've got. Obviously having to, fork out for the rewire and everything, but I've been going down the route, like my kilo of Bramling Cross is gone. I don't have any more Bramling Cross left.
You've done well to get through a kilo of Bramling Cross, to be fair. That's
that's obvious, sir.
It was 3 brews. I did the Northern Monkey. That took care of 370 grams.
Wow.
And then I did the first version of the Bramling Cross Nipa, which got infected. That was 400 and something grams, 425 or 420. And that only left me like 250. So I did a quick pale ale with, well, it wasn't a pale ale, it was a golden ale with some Bramling Cross, and basically just stuck the rest of it in it. So that's gone. I've got another kilo sitting in my basket on Get a Brewed. And when I order that, I'm going to order some more Azaka, and I'm going to order some Idaho 7, not Azaka, and I'm going to order some Nelson to go with it. So
Nice.
That'll be another 3 kilos going into the freezer.
Showing some restraint there then.
Oh, I mean, only ordering 3 kilos at a time is very restrained.
I'm sure.
What are you drinking, Owen?
I'm drinking my black IPA. Bit like you, Tricky. I've just had keg after keg kick pretty much the last week. I think I've gotten through 4 kegs, but I've said to you guys probably in the last podcast, I haven't really brewed a great deal since July. I think I've done 2 brews since July. So I really need to get my brew on.
Yeah, the panic brewing has kicked in now for Christmas. I'm like, there's only 8 weeks till Christmas, and I've got fuck all beer now. But worrying times.
So this black IPA is I'm probably good halfway through now, which is kind of West Coast style black IPA, strata predominantly. I think it's probably past its best now, if I'm honest. Still drinkable, but pretty well balanced. I'm pleased with it. Having drunk a few commercial black IPAs recently, just as a point of reference, I think I'm getting pretty close to mastering the black IPA.
Sounds like a plan.
Hey,
sounds like a plan.
Yeah, no, I think I enjoy a black IPA, and yeah, I think it's good. I'm getting there. It's good.
Right. Can I just take this opportunity to give a shout out to our sponsor, Brewcake Tap? Once again, Johnny at Brewcake Tap, being a legend, continues to support the podcast. We continue to say thank you because it's appreciated. So if you need anything, kegging, dispense, anything Kegland, feel free to hit up Johnny at Brewcake Tap. Make sure you let him know that the Hop Edition sent you. And we're very grateful for his continued support, as we are the support of our Patreons. You will see the names of them scrolling along the bottom of the screen right about now. We haven't had any newbies sign up recently, understandable considering the way that everything's going. But we appreciate every single one of you. We appreciate the fact that you continue to support us. And there are big things on the horizon, which we are currently ironing out the details for February half term. So when that's up and running, all the Patreons will get to know, and probably a few other people as well. So we're grateful, thank you, and we hope that we're doing you justice.
Boom. So Kolsch. Let's talk Kolsch.
Well,
so
what is a Kolsch?
What is a Kolsch?
It is a top fermented lagered beer. More specifically, a top fermented lagered ale. Little bit of history. Originally produced in the 1500s, allegedly. Records. I mean, there was no video, so we can't prove that. In Cologne, in Germany, or Cologne, however you pronounce it, it is a pale, highly attenuated, hoppy, very bright, i.e. it is filtered, not cloudy, and it is a top fermented beer. This is the most important thing that you must remember about a Kolsch. A Kolsch is made with a top fermented beer. It is not a bottom fermented beer. It is a top fermented ale. It's just lagered, and it has to be brewed according to the Reinheitsgebot. And I managed to get that word in again, which I know a lot of people don't like. So it is not a hybrid style. It is a lagered ale. How many Kolsch's have you made, Owen?
1, maybe 2.
Okay.
From memory. Yeah, I'd say probably it was a long time ago, and maybe I probably didn't do it justice, but I would say relatively simple beer to make up until fermentation. I think really that's where your challenge starts
Oh, absolutely.
with a Kolsch. Say, in terms of the recipe, the brewing process, I think if you stay in the guidelines, not too challenging a type of beer to make. Fermentation, a different kettle of fish, I would argue.
And as I proved with the previous Kolsch that I did, which I was drinking when we had Duration Brewing on, sometimes they don't clear up.
No. And what was Bates's advice at that point? I believe
it was sometimes shit just happens.
It was. I think he also talked about some high protein malts requiring potentially a protein rest.
Yeah.
But as you have demonstrated, Chris, obviously you've made a lot of Kolsch's. It's a style that you enjoy a lot, being a big fan of German beers. And you've only ever had one not clear up on you, right?
I have, but weirdly, that was the only one that was made with Omega's Kolsch 2. All the rest of them have been made with either Omega's Kolsch 1, or I did one of them with a Y yeast strain, which was probably the exact same strain as Kolsch 1. So yeah, I fucking love the style. I think it's beautiful. I think it's clean. I think it's crisp, and I think it's drinkable. As the October meetup last year proved, it's a very drinkable beer since you guys spent the better part of 9 hours absolutely annihilating my keg of Kolsch.
Yes, I did. And I'm not even going to say sorry for it.
No, you shouldn't.
Yeah, so I think in my mind, I've talked a little bit about what a Kolsch means to me, and I think, and chip in here if you agree or disagree, I think it kind of drinks like a lager, but it just has that slightly rounded ale, almost kind of fruitiness.
Yeah, exactly.
And doesn't necessarily have that slightly sulfurous edge that a lager does.
I've never found when I've brewed a Kolsch, regardless of what I've used yeast-wise, that I've ever had any of that sulfur nature come through in the beer. I've never ever had it. I've never had a sulfurous edge come through with it. I've never had any kind of I've never had anything other than what I've expected to get flavor-wise from the Kolsch.
Yeah. And I think that slightly fruity character, I'm guessing, point discussed, is coming from the yeast as opposed to anything else within the recipe. And
totally, yeah,
as opposed to the lager yeast is not necessarily providing that rounded fruitiness.
No.
And when we say fruitiness, I'm not talking about like, Jolly Rancher, Nipa type fruitiness. It's just a very subtle, sort of best describes kind of a roundness as opposed to a sharpness that you might get from a lager.
What for some people in a lager would be termed an off flavor from stressed yeast rather than from anything else. If you bump the temperature up by a degree too much and you start to get some esters forming, rather than just clean fermentation.
Exactly.
It's just like that.
Tricky's leant forward.
Did I?
Tricky leant forward. He's got something to say.
I was just going to say it's that distinction between ale, it being an ale lagered rather than a bottom fermented lager that's what you're kind of talking about in terms of that flavor profile as well. It's just got a more, so it's not like Owen say, it's not fruity as in you go, oh, that tastes of peaches or something, but it has a slightly more ale-like character to it, which could be perceived as a very, very subtle fruitiness, or like you're saying, just a more rounded kind of palate. on it. So yeah, maybe not quite as crisp, although I think a good Kolsch can be still, fairly crisp and refreshing.
Yeah.
This is pretty crisp.
But like you say, not quite as sharp, or maybe having that slight touch of like sulfury edge to it that you might get with a lager, to me. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that crispness is coming from the attenuation, right? So you can have a Kolsch and a lager that have attenuated to the same level and provide that same level of mouthfeel. But I think Chris said, like, it's that slight ester production that you're going to get from the ale. So for anyone that's not aware, we're talking about top fermented and bottom fermented beers. Top fermented beers are effectively ales, where you're using a ale yeast or a top fermenting yeast, as a bottom fermented beer will be made with a lager, which is a bottom fermenting yeast. Just get that out there in case anyone's confused. Didn't know that.
It's that whole Saccharomyces cerevisiae versus Saccharomyces carlsbergensis.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Some of them sit on the bottom, some of them sit on the top. It is what it is.
And as you were saying, Owen, like the challenge primarily with these is actually nailing that fermentation process down, so you get just that right amount of character in it without it tipping over into becoming overly fruity. And I think that's one thing that we'll probably talk about more when we look at particularly yeast strains, especially, is that some Kolsch yeasts can very easily lean into some of the much more overly fruity kind of esters. Some of them, in my experience, are particularly prone to banana esters if you let the heat run out of control, or the fermentation just goes a little bit too hot for you. So yeah, it's about just that, giving it enough room to get a bit of character in, without ending up fermenting it so cool that you effectively do create a kind of pseudo lager with it. So yeah, but I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more later.
So an interesting style, I think. And one that I think just from a sort of, are you going to enjoy it? If someone's not drunk a Kolsch before and you're thinking about making a Kolsch, how would we describe the drinkability and the drinking experience of a Kolsch?
I'd always sort of describe it as a more sort of flavoursome kind of, entry level like lager for the home brewer especially, and also something that you can probably give to people who are more used to drinking kind of commercial macro beers and things like that, and they can enjoy it as much as sort of seasoned craft beer drinker can enjoy it for the extra kind of flavors that you get from it as well.
No, absolutely. I'd agree with that completely. I tend to make the Kolsch because Pilsners, specifically the German Pilsners, specifically for me, tend to be overly clean. They tend to not really have much in the way of character. They're hopped quite aggressively on the bittering end, but not really on the flavor end, really, I find. So whilst, yes, they're drinkable and you can smash them back because they've got that crisp, dry kind of, forcing you into getting more beer down your neck kind of flavor, they don't really have much in them that makes them overly interesting. I try to have one on tap most of the time, but the reality is they're not the most interesting of beers. But then you go to the other end of the scale with the Neepers, you can only really have a pint of them. They're not, I find anyway, they're not really the most drinkable of beers. For me, a Kolsch it's a session beer. It's a smash it back when you want 3 or 4. I've also found them to really, really, really good with certain types of food. Like I like the way when you can have a Kolsch with barbecue. I find Kolsch's go incredibly well with burgers. I just think that edge, that borderline fruitiness that we've just been talking about, I just think that ability to cut through certain types of food, specifically fatty foods, I think it just works really, really well. It's also a great beer for me, and I use this as a, my shed's not particularly big, but it just take 2 chairs, and we do have a table just outside the door. So when my mates come over, regardless of the time of year, it's a great beer to just sit down and drink. It's easy drinking while you're having a chat or whatever. But I also find, and this is probably the crux of it for me, is it's interesting enough to keep you entertained when you're drinking it, rather than anything else. They're not particularly difficult to make, as long as you can follow the fucking manual and ferment it at the right temperature and not go off piste with the fermentation. As long as you've got the right yeast, it's a very easy style to nail. Yes, the fermentation is different, but the reality is it's not particularly difficult. And that, for me, is what makes a Kolsch a great beer, is its drinkability and relative ease of production.
And I think in comparison to making a lager, you can tend to turn it round quicker as well, can't you? So your fermentation doesn't tend to be as long.
No, it doesn't.
You don't tend to have to lager it for as long. So it's almost a bit like, it's not quite pseudo lager territory, because it's not trying to be a lager. It's acknowledging that it's a lagered ale, but you can turn it around in a relatively short space of time, much like an ale. So that sort of has benefits as well, doesn't it?
And it's traditional to serve it fresh too. So you're kind of actually, brewing it to style if you are knocking it out fairly quickly after that. So, yeah, a couple of weeks of lagering, maybe a couple of weeks fermenting, you should be good to go in most cases.
Yeah, it's like the Hefeweizen of the lagered beer world, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's it. Which I think is probably a big plus for a lot of people that tend to like something very light and easy to drink, and that it's not going to take them 3 months to effectively get it to a good place to drink. So that's a real bonus, I think.
No, definitely.
So in terms of what are we kind of thinking about? A really great example of a Kolsch. What sort of aroma are we expecting on that sort of beer?
I have drunk quite a few commercial Kolsch's, as you can probably imagine. I tend to find that the better Kolsch's are the ones with the more floral aroma. Just that floral nature, the as I like to call it, the Bavarian meadow. I tend to think of that as more of a, that it's you can't really describe, you can't nail it down much more than to just say floral. That's kind of where I would go. I would also expect, weirdly enough, an almost peppery note. Not too much of a peppery note, but like Tettnang bite, because a good traditional Kolsch tends to be hopped with Tettnang or
It's a little bit spicy. Just a little bit of a spice character, similar to a lager in a sense.
Absolutely, definitely. But also on the flavour, I would expect quite a lot of that, for want of a better term, that graham cracker, that Pilsner base. I'd expect that to come through quite clearly as well, because that is one of the better parts of the beer, is the way that the Pilsner base, or the German pale malt base, because I know a lot of Kolsch producers do use that pale lager base. I think that coming through, that graham cracker, that graham cracker kind of flavor, is what I would expect, and to be honest, what I look for in a commercial Kolsch.
Yeah, I think it's so. All right. We're on the subject of grains. We're expecting at the style to have a relatively light malt presence, which comes across as more of that graham cracker, classic Pilsner German malt character. Maybe even bordering a slight honey sort of vibe.
I do get that with a couple of the commercial ones that I drink on the regular. Yeah, yeah.
So let's
The style itself. Sorry, Owen.
go on.
The style itself basically says, you can make it with either German Pilsner malt or you can make it with German pale malt. Both work. But the pale malt tends to come from Turo, which isn't completely different to German Pilsner anyway. Maybe just treated slightly differently, maybe kilned slightly differently, but it needs to be really light. Certain breweries add up to about 20% wheat, I think, purely for the head retention aspect. I don't personally like those examples which have the 20% wheat in them. I don't find them as enjoyable as the ones that are 100% Pilsner or very low levels of wheat. I tend to find them much more drinkable than the other ones. But I do like the particular versions which tend to use Hersbrucker and Tettnang in the actual hopping. That for me tends to make more of a difference than the grain.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily a malt. It's not a malt forward style, is it?
No.
I think what presently the real presence of the style is going to be the slight, very subtle ale yeast esters, as we've talked about, and a very subtle hop character from some of the varieties that Chris has already mentioned, but supported by, again, a quite subtle, grainy, kind of crackery sort of supporting piece. So it's a very light and delicate. It's kind of a delicate beer.
It is a delicate beer.
Yeah,
it is a delicate style of beer.
Delicately balanced is definitely a good way to describe it, and not having any of those component parts sort of overwhelming the others. Not massively hoppy, it's not massively malty, it's just drinkable. Nicely balanced and drinkable between the two. I've always kind of thought of it a little bit like if you crossed a sort of quite traditional kind of low hopped kind of golden ale with a Hell's lager or something like that. A Kolsch is sort of somewhere in that sort of vicinity, obviously usually sticking with the more traditional German noble hops rather than UK varieties, but you could probably get away with brewing a sort of UK hopped Kolsch and it's still tasting fairly close to. It might be a fun one to try out actually at some point.
Sorry guys, my phone is buzzing constantly and I'm trying to work out how to turn off the vibration, and I'm not having much in the way of look. So I'm going on to do not disturb because for some reason it's pissing me off. To be fair, it's entirely Brett the Bollard's fault because he's talking in our private chat and it keeps buzzing really loudly. So yeah, if my phone falls off, I apologize. But I do think that's a great way to describe it, Tricky. I think, put bluntly, I tend to think of a Kolsch as a German equivalent of a golden ale.
Mm-hmm.
Not because it tastes like it or anything, but because it slides itself style-wise into that easy drinking, very pleasant, easy to produce, not particularly complicated, drinkable session beer.
100%. I think like those base sort of the numbers wise, the base parameters would probably be very similar. Maybe bitterness might be a bit lower on a Kolsch versus what you'd see on a golden ale. But yeah, it's kind of like a little bit like how an alt beer is German to a bitter, a Kolsch is kind of German to a golden ale, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's legit. It's quite an interesting style though when you think about it, as far as where it fits into Cologne. Just taking it away from discussing the parameters, I want to come back to the yeast, but it's traditionally served in a 200 ml glass. It's traditionally served basically in just slightly more than a third of a pint, and that glass is called a Stanger. And it's served from a kranz, which is a wreath-shaped serving platter, which has this wonderful central handle for carrying it around. It's a chandelier of beer, is what it is when they serve it. It's quite cool. Nobody think that?
Yeah, very much so. I think the Germans are big on like serving beer in a different way in terms of like generally like quite a lot of consumption, and then just sort of isn't it if you go to the local traditional bars that serve Kolsch, it's that if you go in, they'll just keep topping up your beer until you put the beer mat on the top of the glass, right? So it's kind of almost this, it's kind of the Brazilian Radicchio like theme of drinking, which I guess is interesting. It's just we're going to pour a load of beer and we're just going to can them out like candy until people go, nah, I've had enough. How much do I eat?
It would get dangerous very quickly.
Even in a 200ml serving, I could get myself in trouble with that pretty quickly, I reckon.
Oh, very quickly. It's quite cool. Just a little bit more as far as the history of the Kolsch goes. So in 1997, it was given PGI, protected geographical indication. So basically, unless you were within Cologne, you can't make a Kolsch as long as you're in the EU, which we're not. But if you're in the EU, you can't call it a Kolsch. You have to call it a Kolsch style beer.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I think that is wonderful. It's like you can't call a pasty made in Bradford a Cornish pasty. It has to be just a pasty. I get it. I understand it. But the reason why they did this, and it's quite interesting, right? In 1667 and 1668, there were attempts made to legislate against the production of bottom fermented beers. They literally forbid the sale of bottom fermented beers within the city walls of Cologne.
Okay.
Right? And essentially what happened then was there was loads of kind of problems. All these bottom fermented beers in the early 17th century were essentially threatening the business interests of the brewers who only produced top fermented beers. Because like Owen was saying when we were doing the notes for this the other night, the other side of the bridge is where they produce alt beers. So you've got this whole top fermented culture within that area. And then you had all these bottom fermented beers which were coming in and threatening the livelihood of 60 some odd breweries or something that was in that area at the time. And it was crazy to me to read that this fantastic style of beer, this amazing style of beer, this totally drinkable style of beer nearly stopped existing because of the prevalence of bottom fermented beers. I think that's a wonderful story, and I understand why, and I'm very grateful to the Cologne Council for basically continuing to push for this beer and to get it PGI, because I do think the loss of a Kolsch would be a loss to the brewing world, not just because it's one of my favorite styles or anything, but purely because I think that history of it being made in one specific area, named after the area, I think that's a wonderful story. And the history of it, I don't want to lose.
And I think we've had a lot of conversations in the past about the development and evolution of a beer style, which you see in a lot of modern beer styles. So you compare, say, the OG West Coast style to the West Coast style of IPA people are brewing now. You look at New England IPA as its original form compared to what it's being consumed as today. Like, things just progress. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think sometimes there's a risk that you actually lose that original mold, if you will. And I think actually the Germans are very good in so much as kind of saying, you know what, if we've made something amazing, we want to keep it in that form, and no one's going to come along and morph it into something else.
No,
Well,
and we
perhaps they
don't want that.
can. Perhaps people can do that, but at least they've properly established kind of a well set mold for what that style of beer should be about.
And a protection.
Yeah.
A protection of it as well. I had a conversation with Johnny from Brewkeg Tap when I last phoned him up, trying to nail down a date for him to join us on the pod. And one of the things, because Johnny's missus is, I think she's German. I hope I'm not mistaken that. I'm pretty sure she's German. But he went off to Germany at the end of the summer for a holiday. And he was saying, you could walk into pretty much any beer keller or any kind of beer house in Germany, get a beer for maybe euro 70, and it'll be amazing because of the heritage of brewing within that. Now, I don't know about you guys, and I'm not going to name any names, but I have been to some breweries in the UK where I've walked in and paid £7 for a pint, and it's been utter shit, and I've walked out.
I would
And I'm
agree
sure,
with that. Yeah.
I think in Germany, I don't think those breweries survive because people walk in and go, "Das ist shit, yeah," and then walk out and go into another pub, and that pub will instantly, or pretty much instantly, stop selling that beer. So I think that there is a culling that takes place within the German beer production world and the beer selling world, which quickly whittles down those bad brewers and bad breweries to give only the good ones remaining.
Well, no, I think there's in danger of kind of disappearing down a rabbit hole tangent here. There is a very different style of brewery in Germany.
Oh, very much so,
right,
yeah.
Compared to what we kind of have, if they might be a little more comparable to our kind of trad breweries in the UK, in so much as they're going to have maybe 3 styles of beer.
Yeah.
Right. And they might occasionally do some seasonals. And they reproduce those same 3 beers, and it's about the perfection of that style. And it's about the consistent quality production of that style. Whereas I do find, and I'm sure craft brewers across the land would agree with me, that producing to the needs of today's craft beer aficionado is craft people that like craft beer want different stuff all the time. They want variety for the most part.
I wasn't talking about specifically craft breweries when I was talking about breweries in the UK, but I appreciate your point, and I completely agree with it.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they're having to produce so much variety is invariably there tends to be a lot of quality issues that occur in that space. So you can tend to sort of just get beers that just aren't that great, are pretty meh all the way through to just they're just awful, right? Or even trad breweries, the not so good trad breweries sometimes are just going to produce beer that's not great. But anyway, I don't really know where I'm going with that. But
yeah, it seems like the whole German thing is basically based around maintaining tradition, but also a kind of baseline standard of quality for stuff, and the whole Reinheitsgebot and all of that kind of stuff. In the past, there's maybe an element of kind of almost like economic protectionism to the way that styles like Kolsch have been maintained because of, effectively brewers not being able to progress and develop or brew in different styles due to legislation. But at the end of the day, it's kept a, sort of unique and traditional, very drinkable beer style alive, which is probably for the best for all of us in the long run. So yeah, it's interesting in some ways that although some people might see it as sort of limiting, I guess, progress and development in some ways, that on the flip side of that, you can say, well, there's beers there that have been honed to perfection over hundreds of years.
Yep.
Versus, as you're saying, something that somebody's basically come up with on the back of a fag packet last week, and hopefully it will be good. Maybe it won't.
I'll be honest. I'm pretty sure most of them don't even write on fag packets. They just use Rizzlers. I think it's even lower quality than the back of a Benson and Edges packet. I'll be honest.
Well, that's an expensive way to write a recipe these days.
It is on the back of a fag packet, like 12 quid a pack or something, aren't they? I don't know. I quit smoking.
Probably more than that, mate. To be honest.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the aroma, weren't we? And we sort of got onto the subject of the grain.
Yeah. Sorry, I completely derailed that one.
The grain presence. And now I'm just sort of circling us back, Chris. So let's talk a bit about the grist then. You know, if you're going to make a good Kolsch, what are we looking at in terms of the grist?
It seems like the general consensus is pretty much you can just go all Pilsner malt, and that'll be perfectly fine. Optional for a bit of wheat. Looking back at some of the recipes that I've done, I think when I have made Kolsches in the past, I've clearly found it very hard to resist throwing something extra in. Because I'm not sure I can find a recipe that I've done where it's literally just been Pilsner malt and maybe a bit of wheat. So that there's always been something like, so looking at some examples, either a dash of Munich or a little bit of Carahel or something like that in there. But, you know, clearly that's not necessarily needed. But I mean, I think if you are going to add anything else in there, just be very restrained in terms of what you're doing. I don't think there's any issue really with putting a little bit of Munich or something else in there. But if you want to go, you know, keep it traditional, seems like most of the recipes and articles on it suggest that basically a German Pilsner malt or even a pale malt will be sufficient.
That's basically what they say. They say anything up to 20% wheat for some breweries, but it is German Pilsner or German Pale from Two Row. Yeah. And that's another thing that I love is the tradition of it. It's like you must use this fucking malt. You can have a bit of this, but you must use this malt. And that to me is the wonderful part about it, is the way in which it works. So yeah, that's just me. That's the way that I feel. I agree with you completely, Tricky. The hops are where it gets really interesting for me, which is why most of the Kolsch's that I've had taste the same, is because you get Hallertauer and Pearl for bittering, and you get Tettnang and Hersbrucker for aroma. Those are the traditional choices.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's some people using Saz, which, to be fair, would not exactly displease me. I think that if you use Pearl for bittering and you use Hersbrucker for aroma, I think that makes a truly fantastic Kolsch. I do.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's, you know, you want to keep it a fairly traditional recipe. I've seen lots of recipes out there where there isn't even a late addition of hops as well. It will just be literally
60 minutes, 30 minute. Yeah,
that's it. Nothing else. So get it up to about 20 IBUs, 20, 25 IBUs. Job done.
Add a little bit in there for flavor,
yeah,
or tiny little bit of aroma carryover. That's all you need.
So, you know, I personally would always like a little bit late in the boil as well, just to give you, like you were talking about, those Bavarian meadow aromatics, and I think that is all about those noble hops sort of late on. Not a huge amount, so
no,
you know, probably, I don't know what, like 15-20 grams will be enough
at
normally
most. At most, yeah. I mean, I think the last recipe, in fact, just give me a second and I'll pull it up. Oh god, where's my? I'm not going to fiddle around with my Windows. I'm having PC issues. I'm not going to do it. I'm fairly sure that the one that I was drinking at the start had a 10-minute addition of 12 grams of Tettnang, and that was it.
Yeah. So again, you know, it's kind of being restrained, isn't it? Now, I think again, obviously we're talking sort of very traditional at the moment. There is scope to try out other other hop varieties and more modern varieties. I think one of the things that you can do is look for those varieties that are derivatives of traditional noble hops that have been grown elsewhere that can be quite interesting.
Styrian.
Yes, so Slovenian hops are a good shout. Bobek's really nice, yeah. You can even go. I mean, you certainly see sort of craft breweries, if they are doing things like Kolsch's, will sometimes experiment with more modern new world hops, but you can get some quite sort of subtle. One that I've used actually before was Wakatu, because that's a New Zealand Hallertau, I think, basically a Hallertau variety that's been replanted in New Zealand, and it is, as far as New Zealand hops go, super subtle in terms of like the fruity elements from it. So it does come across as a fairly traditional kind of noble hopping character, and that worked quite well. So yeah, obviously tradition, you want to stick with those obvious German noble varieties, but because it's such a subtle beer, it's a nice thing to experiment with, using some of the slightly more modern varieties, I think, if you want to just try something out in, but just don't drop 100 grams of Citra in flame out, because it's kind of gonna spoil the aesthetic somewhat.
300 gram dry hop,
yeah.
That's 250 Whirlpool,
not going to be a Kolsch anymore.
Hop, yeah,
we're going to draw the line somewhere, right?
Double dry hop with Galaxy.
No, mate, no.
Yeah, that was a joke. Anyway, so we've covered grain, we've covered hop choices. Great advice, Tricky. We talked about yeast yet?
Not in terms of specific varieties, no. So although Chris has mentioned a couple of them already, but yeah, sorry, go on, Owen.
Before we get to that, so we talked a bit about grist. Should we talk a bit about mashing, the process? So sort of what temps are you going to be trying to sort of shoot for?
You're generally looking for a fairly dry result, aren't you? So you're going to be towards the low end, mash temperature wise.
Pretty like 65, 66.
That description does specifically mention well attenuated, doesn't it? And so you want a dry finish.
I think the if we can say BJCP guidelines without laughing, final gravity is generally 1007 to 1011. 1011, should I say?
Yeah. Mine, the ones that I've produced specifically, tend to hit about 1008 and not really go much lower than 1008. I mash at 65, just to give that crisp, clean kind of more the crispness at the end, and to also get it to be a little touch drier. I found that the Omega 1 variety tends to stop pretty hard at around about 1008, 1009, maybe, depending on where you mash. First version I did, I mashed at 67 with an error. Second version I mashed at 65 and it hit 1008.
I think that's like a pretty good target, I think, isn't it? 1008, 1009. Pretty much the middle of that range. I think 1011 would probably just be a little too sweet. That's
too sweet.
You're going to really notice it in such a delicate style of beer. Yep. You're going to notice that additional sweetness. I mean, you could potentially offset that with a little bit more bitterness, but you're
not really going to hide it completely.
There's a risk that the style just starts to kind of nudge out to something a little bit not quite Kolsch.
No, exactly. You want to be as close to those guidelines as you can be in order to truly nail the Kolsch style. As much as that is me saying go to guidelines, but I think if you don't hit the guidelines with a Kolsch, you will end up with a Pilsner.
Yeah.
And if you end up with a Pilsner, then you've not made a Kolsch. And that sounds obvious, but the reality is you want that quaffability, that drinkability of the Kolsch, as well as that hint of fruit fruity esters more than anything else, and I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, so you're talking single infusion at 65.
Yep.
For an hour, nothing special. You're not decoction mashing this thing. It's just a pretty straightforward mash.
It is. Is that how you did yours, Tricky, when you did yours?
What, just a straight infusion mash?
Yeah.
I've never mucked around with any step mashing or I've never done a decoction mash full stop. Definitely never done it for a Kolsch.
No, I mean I can't see it being a requirement for a Kolsch, to be fair.
I don't think it's ever something that I've really seen mentioned in terms of like any articles I've read on actually brewing them traditionally either. I mean, no doubt, being Germany, there will be some breweries that are doing, step mashes and things like that, but it's not something that is talked about as the kind of, standard practice. You must do this in order for it to be a traditional Kolsch or whatever.
I think the main reason why people may be doing the step mash as opposed to doing a decoction is decoction tends to give you more of a darker color.
Yeah.
And the Kolsch is specifically straw colored.
Mm-hmm.
It's about as light a beer as you can get. If you go full on Pilsner, don't decoction, and just boil it as normal, ferment it clean and hop it appropriately, it's going to be one of the lighter beers that you will drink.
Yeah.
And God, they're so fucking good. This is such a great beer. I mean, it's a real shame. It is just a great beer. It really is. It's such a wonderful, wonderful beer. And it's a shame that more people in the homebrew world don't just knock one up and stick it on a tap. It's a great fucking seriously. Anybody who's listening to this right now, if you have never made a Kolsch, find a legit recipe and just make a bloody Kolsch. They're so good. They're so good. Just be careful what yeast strain you use, because some of them taste like banana.
So yeah, speaking of yeast strains,
yes.
So you mentioned Omega.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the first version is your preference out of the two.
Kolsch 1 versus Kolsch 2. Kolsch 1 all the way. Kolsch 1 all the way. Most of them are derivative of a strain called the German 177 strain.
Yeah.
It's typically fermented out between 12 and 14, not exceeding 22, because otherwise you end up with a fruit bomb mess. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, when I did the research into Omega's Kolsch 1, that was the German 177 strain. I believe that the vast majority of them are the German 177 strain.
Yeah. So I've been having a look at some yeast comparison charts, and as per usual, you get a different thing on each one.
Yep.
So it seems quite difficult to pin down what the actual equivalents are, but the strains that most people will be familiar with, and there is a couple of sort of dry versions out now as well. So Laumond have a dried Koln yeast, I think they call their one.
Steve Gatsby, who's on the chat, is probably like screwing his face up at our pronunciation of some of these words. I don't know how to pronounce cologne in German, so Steve, if you want to do an alliterative sentence which tells us exactly, that's totally the wrong word. If you just want to tell us exactly how to pronounce that word Köln, then I'd be greatly appreciative. So yeah, we've got someone who lives in Germany. Just say it, Steve. Sorry, go on, Tricky.
What was I saying? So yeah, the main look at that service.
Snacks just appear.
I've lost my train of thought completely here. So yeah, the main varieties that I've sort of used and am aware of, you've got White Labs 029, which may or may not be an equivalent of the Omega Kolsch 1 or 2. Like I said, all the charts I look at seem to have a different version. But to be honest, I think that even if they are supposed to be equivalent, you'll find that different yeast labs' version of the same yeast will often behave quite differently anyway. So it's not, it's definitely not always the case that it's going to be a straight equivalent anyway. So yeah, White Labs 029 is one that I've used quite a bit. I found that one is, judging by how easily your one has cleared down, Chris, my experience of 029 is that is a less flocculent version. So I guess out of the two, if it was going to be based just on that characteristic closer to one of the Omega ones, maybe that would be closer to Omega 2. Then you've got the Y East version, which is, hang on, where's it gone? I've had it in front of me a second ago. 2565. So yeah, it seems like there's a kind of a couple of commercial strains that have been isolated and used by most of these labs. Figuring out which of those two you're actually using seems to be a little bit more of a challenge, but as always, just try them out yourself and decide for yourself which ones you like best. There's also Cross My Loof have a Kolsch yeast, which they've kind of repackaged, dried yeast. I've used that a bit.
I will say on that front, be very careful about your fermentation temperature if you're using the Cross My Loof one. It can be a real banana bomb.
100%. I mean, I think that there must be a bit of shared lineage between the Weiss yeasts and the Kolsch yeasts, because it does seem like banana, if you go hot, tends to be the sort of off flavor or over the top ester that you get with a lot of them.
Incidentally, on mentioning that point, Tricky, I would like to drag us back to the history of the Kolsch. The name Kolsch was first coined in 1918 to describe beers made by the Sunner Brewery in Germany, which I have undoubtedly pronounced wrong because there's some sort of umlaut or some accent over one of the letters in that word. And it was actually developed from a Weiss beer. There you go.
There you go.
That would explain all of the yeast characteristics.
Yeah.
But then they've been making it for quite a few hundred years before that, right? In terms of, I'm not really sure. Like, that's just where the name came from, right?
No, absolutely. However, if they've developed it from a Weiss beer, and it was using the same yeast, just fermented cooler,
yeah,
that may end up being the origins of if you ferment it too warm, you get banana.
Yeah. And I could certainly see you being able to make a fairly convincing Weiss beer if you used the Kolsch yeast and just pushed it hot as well, because of that ester profile. So
Steve Gadsby's just corrected us. Cologne is pronounced Kuln or Kuln.
Oh, well, I wasn't too far off.
We were fucking close, boys. I think we're basically German today.
What's the alt beer yeast? The classic alt beer yeast.
It's the same fucking yeast, man.
Yeah, it is right. I was going to sort of say
the
like
same fucking yeast.
The alt yeast is effectively
much,
exactly the same thing as the Kolsch yeast, right?
Yeah,
it's literally just across the bridge.
I want to do an episode on alt beers as well because, man, they're just amazing as well.
That will just be Chris talking for 2 hours and us sort of nodding.
Because neither of you, well, Owen's produced an alt beer, but didn't you ferment it with something that wasn't an alt beer yeast?
No, I used the alt beer yeast.
The Dusseldorf alt beer yeast is fantastic.
That's exactly what I used.
It works really well for making Kolsch's as well.
So yeah, coming back to we mentioned the Cross My Loof dried yeast. I've had the same experience of Chris with that, where if it was anywhere close to sort of 20 degrees or above, it just goes to banana bomb city, and like pretty extreme banana esters coming off of it for me when I did that, and particularly with that yeast and I did. I think I got quite a bit of not as potent, but I did get some banana esters off of omega 2 once when I used that as well. I think it's certainly a good idea to be looking at the low end of the temperature range with these yeasts, pretty much, well, with all of them, really, to be honest, especially when you're starting the fermentation off. So it's definitely one of those where I think it benefits from you keeping it pretty much at the lowest end of the range initially, before you even think about warming it up if you have to. But they tend to ferment out fairly quickly anyway and attenuate quite well. So for me personally, my advice will always be just keep it at the bottom end of the range. And I've also found once I got into using pressure fermenting that a little bit of pressure on there really helps too. You don't want to go like, and this is obviously not very traditional as such, because I'm, pretty certain that the traditional Kolsch breweries are not going to be pressure fermenting, but just in terms of suppressing any of those esters that you don't want, it certainly worked for me. Just don't crank it up too high and have the temperature so low that, like you're saying before, you end up basically making something that's more lager-like in character.
I found 7 psi at 16 degrees worked pretty much flawlessly.
Yeah.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was the reason you turned up to listen to the podcast.
Yeah. There is a lot to be said for the all-rounders when it comes to being able to nail in those pressures and temperatures. And, if I had to say, if you're going to produce a Kolsch, it's 100% Pilsner, go with floor malted, Bavarian floor malted, obviously.
If you can afford it.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to sell a kidney to buy a bag. But then I would go with Omega 1. I would go with Pearl for bittering. I would go with Tetnang for aroma, maybe 12 to 15 grams at about 10 minutes. And ferment it pretty low, but do it under a little bit of pressure. Maybe 7 psi is what I dialed mine into. And that was the best one that I ever made. That was, it was bang on.
Was that the one we were drinking at when we came up to see you, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one
that was exceptionally good.
Yeah, you guys basically battered the fuck out that keg. So yeah,
we voted with our feet or with our beer glasses on that one. Really, didn't we?
You did.
It definitely took a hammering.
I went for the classic tap run through, and it wasn't a little sample. It was like I went pint for pint, and then it was like I whittled it down to the old beer and the Kolsch.
Yeah, made with exactly the same yeast, both of them.
Yeah,
great beers, great beer. I mean, you can't. We have to touch on water chemistry for those people who are trying to make one. And one of the things that I will say about the water chemistry for a Kolsch that really assists with the flavor, really assists with the aroma, and really assists with the control of the bitterness is basically just go for pretty much a flat line, basic. I went with Pilsen is my profile. Low bicarb, and go a touch more acidic than you normally would. Okay, so I went with, believe it or not, a pH of 4.95.
Ooh,
wow!
And I did it purely because I wanted that acid nature going into the boil kettle, because some of the acid was going to boil off. I wanted that crispness. I wanted that. Well, it worked. Let's put it that way. 4.95, and I believe my bicarb was something ridiculous, like 12 or 22. It ended in a 2, and it was low. And that was from an RO base. You basically don't have to add hardly anything. I put a decent amount of magnesium in there. Chlorine was pretty low. I can't open up Brewfather to tell you. I daren't fiddle with the setup.
I mean chloride. Chloride.
Sorry, chloride.
Low. Yeah.
Chloride was pretty low.
So I think that's probably a pretty key point, isn't it? It's the fact that RO water. So unless you're very lucky and you live in a
Scotland.
glacial area or whatever, and have really, really clean, very, very soft water coming through your tap, then you're going to really want to try and obtain RO water, ideally.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Even with certain acids and stuff, you're going to struggle to get to the right water profile for that style of beer.
If you're having to use CRS or AMS or anything like that, you're going to end up with a sulfur and chlorine, which is off the chart as far as the Kolsch goes.
Chloride.
Yeah. I've had a sausage roll for my tea. All right. Cut me some slack.
Right.
No, nobody's going to cut you slack for getting
I'm not
chemical names
on
wrong.
that.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to reap my...
Not after the shit we've taken over.
Vengeance.
You deserve it.
Over
Some of
the
the
months.
shit you guys talk
The
about.
months and years.
So the chloride,
sulfites, not sulfide.
sulfate, sulfide, they're all proper. Anyway, I'm gonna stop drinking now so I sober up so I can fucking cunt you guys again. The main thing is minerals tend to be quite low bicarb. Go a touch more acidic on your mash. Don't be afraid to drop into the 4s, but stay in the high 4s. No 4.2s, right? You're going to make a sour. And it tends to just make for a cleaner beer when you get through the fermentation profile. In fact, to be fair, all the steps that we've talked about are going to help you to improve this beer. I genuinely believe that this beer is one of those beers that if you put the effort into designing the right water profile, you get the right setup, you boil for the right amount of time, and don't be afraid to boil this beer for 90 minutes, okay? Just be careful with the way that you set this one up, and I believe you're going to produce a beer that you're going to love. I'm very passionate about this beer, and I do believe that everybody, there's nowhere to hide with this beer, so if you fuck up, you're going to see it, you're going to taste it. Just be diligent with your setup, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I concur with all of the water chemistry stuff there. I think whenever I've done it, it's always been just keeping the mineral content as low. Well, not sort of pilsner low, but around that sort of level, and you want it balanced in terms of your sulfate and chlorides. Because if you're going too high on the sulfate, particularly, then you're going to maybe start to get that sort of more like German pilsner bitterness.
That little chalkiness, you don't want it.
And it's you want everything to be sort of balanced and a fairly sort of soft palate as far as the bitterness that does come through from a Kolsch for me. So yeah, pretty much agree with all of that. And I always would be starting off with RO. So yeah,
you want that Bavarian meadow to truly sing. That's what you want. Yeah. And don't be afraid to put some Tettnang in. I know Tettnang's a hop that a lot of people don't like, but Tettnang in this style of beer, specifically with Pearl for my palate, it works phenomenally well. That touch of spice, that floral nature makes for an incredibly drinkable beer. One that you
Tettnang's just got a little bit more, I guess a slightly more bold flavour to it than some of the other kind of Hallertau type varieties. So Tettnang's just got a little bit more ballsy, I guess, in terms of that little touch of spice that you get from it, and just adds, a nice counterpoint, I guess, to the.
It really does. You can use
sweetness from the malt.
Yeah, you can use Hersbrucker, but Hersbrucker will give you a much more floral beer at the end.
A little bit of both as well. It's good idea.
Tettnang, actually, that's not a bad shout for my next brew. Tettnang at 20 minutes, Hersbrucker at 10.
Yeah.
Best of both worlds, mate.
Wow. That's spicy. It'd be like a Bavarian meadow where you're eating a chipotle like chili pepper. No, let's do that. Next one, I'm doing that. I need to write a note.
Yeah, I've been looking through some of the recipes I've done because I've not brewed a huge number of Kolsches, but I think sort of 4 or 5 of them over the years intermittently. And I think the one that I remember being particularly good was using Tetnang. Had 14 grams at 15 and another 14 at 5 minutes of that. And I did use SARS as my bittering addition. Like I was talking about before, couldn't resist throwing in something a little bit extra in the grist. So it adds 400 grams of Vienna, as well as the Pilsner malt, German Pilsner, and White Labs 029. And that came out really nice.
That'd be a good beer, though.
And
I'm not sure about the Vienna.
Yeah, I mean, it was 10% of the grist, so it didn't make a huge amount of difference, probably.
You can't resist fucking around with perfection, can you, Tricky?
No, I just I really struggle with just doing a single malt in the grist for some reason. Like, I've got all these other ones that I could use. I've got to throw something else in.
The thing that I find about adding the Vienna into something like a Kolsch, not that I've ever done it, but even adding Vienna into a Pilsner, is I appear to be quite, not susceptible, but I appear to be able to taste quite a lot of it. Is when you put the Vienna in, I always end up with that caramelized kind of hobnob flavor coming through, which is really nice in a lot of beers. But no matter how small an amount of Vienna I use, I tend to end up with hobnobs.
Hobnob Kolsch.
Yeah, it's not unpleasant in a lot of beers. I'm just not entirely sure that it would.
It's reserve it for the old beer, isn't it? Really?
Oh, definitely.
Not the Kolsch.
Yeah.
So I think a bit like Tricky, as homebrewers, we are all too tempted to look at a single grain grist and go, oh, but what if I just...
Right. I could throw some honey malt in this.
I know how I can improve this recipe that's been honed to perfection over 300 years.
When that question runs through your head when you're looking at a Kolsch recipe, what if I just stop there? Just go, no, stop there. And remember, this is less is more. This is it's beauty and simplicity, I think, with this style of it.
I think if you're going to go for a Kolsch and the phrase, what if I just come into your mind, somebody needs to give you a slap.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's the point where we're at. It's a wonderfully simple beer that drinks incredibly well. I don't think you need to fuck with it.
I would agree.
I think that's the opinion section sorted. So right now, empty glass.
Commercial break.
Can we do a commercial break for like 30 minutes now?
Commercial break to the end, basically, because I think we finished.
Can I ask you an off-topic question?
Yeah.
Have you guys ever used Escarpment laboratory yeast?
Once.
I think they're Canadian.
Used them once.
What was your view?
I thought that they were incredible yeasts, specifically for the. I used one of theirs in a fruity, in a cloudy pale ale that I made once, kind of a junior Nepa, or a Nepa as it would have been. And the yeast were beautiful. It grew well. It kicked off like a fucking champ. I remember having to make a starter because it was quite a low cell count, but I had no questions at all about the quality of their yeast. I thought they were very, very good.
Nice. Yeah, I was just having a look at them. I need to get some base malt, which I'm completely out of. And normally
you're completely out of base malt.
Yeah, you know that impy I made.
Oh well, yeah.
Last weekend.
That'll explain it.
The 27 kilos that you put in that would have done you. Yeah.
Not quite. It wasn't quite 27 kilos. It was 10.8, wasn't it? 10.8 kilos, which I made up with. I think it was Bohemian floor malted Pilsner. Don't shoot me. I had to go with it. That's all I had.
I'm gonna beat the fuck out you when I see you.
Golden Promise and crisp extra pale malt. So it was a combination. It was probably 50% floor malted Pilsner and 25% of the other two. And so I'm completely out. Normally I run a bag of pale malt and a bag of Pilsner malt. so I need to re-up. And I'm just looking at yeasts on the malt mellow and checking out some of the escarpment yeasts, and they're actually sounding really exciting. There's a new one called Hydra, which is a genetic hybrid of Vermont and another one of their strains, which sounds quite exciting.
I have to say, I'm surprised that you would use Pilsner in an Impy, because you're not going to taste it at all.
No, I know, and that's what, like, it was literally a case of poor planning, and I wanted to brew, and that's all I had. So it was a massive waste of a very expensive, like 5 kilos of floor malted Pilsner malt. You know?
That's a very expensive Impy.
Yeah,
can I just say before I pour it, Bowler,
you've gone Gypsy Hill again.
I had my Gypsy Hill bruiser order arrived, and I had their strawberry shortcake, something or other sour, and it was amazing. So I'm going to be balling it for a little while, which, based on the fact that I'm already pissed, and I've already had quite a few beers on a sausage roll and nothing else, this could get fucking interesting quickly. So yeah, what have you guys got for your commercials? Let's do a quick can show.
I haven't even opened mine yet. I'm still drinking.
Ooh.
I'm still drinking a Unity beer. And
hang on, Tricky. Hang on. I need to blow you up to full screen, mate. Full screen. What's Tricky? What is that?
That looks like a funky can up.
That looks like something you got from Japan.
Still see what does it actually say on the side there?
Looks like Salvador Dali's.
Freeway handshake is the name. Hence the weird. Yeah.
That's bitching can art, man.
Dali-esque hands coming out of some.
And it's a Verdant, is it?
It's is that reading backwards to you as well?
No. So
Verdant,
Verdant,
and Rivington. So
nice.
Yeah, wow. Shout out to Jack from Baron.
Yeah, go Jack.
Beers on there. We didn't do the Baron podcast live, but I do recommend anyone who hasn't listened to that one yet goes back and listens to that on your usual podcast providers or the website.
One thing that I will say,
a really good episode, I thought.
One thing that I will say right now about Baron Brewing is they've currently got an offer on their website where you get 12 cans for 50 quid. Legit. The beers he's got in stock, if you're owing, probably most of them are going to be either a 9%, 8%, or a 10% tipper. So there's some proper beers on there. I was a bit disappointed that there was none of that Funky Feet or the one that I really liked, whatever it was called.
Skinny Feels.
That's the one. Skinny Feels, Funky Feet, whatever it was called.
Close.
Cracking beer, that one. Jack needs to rebrew that, and I know he doesn't like rebrewing, but he needs to rebrew that one. That was superb. Owen, I didn't see your can, mate. Pull it up.
Yeah, no, I think there was a bit. I think he does make a beer called Funky Feels or Funky Feet.
Oh, right.
But the one that you really liked was called Skinny Feels, I think.
That was
if you guys, anyone that's listening that's like a real hazy boy, go and check out Baron, because that's pretty much like Jack's wheelhouse, and he's absolutely smashing it at the moment.
It was a great podcast, that.
Basically running an entire brewery single-handedly and producing some absolutely amazing beers. So here's my beer. I'll focus.
Cheese? It's called Cheese.
She's fruity.
Explains my missus.
So this is a beer from, I'm not sure what brewery it's from. It's a International Women's Collaboration Brew Day lime and berry sour ale. This is Buxton Brewery to support a podcast that they put out. I think supporting International Women's Collaboration Brew Day. I'm excited. I can't hear you, Chris. I think you must be muted.
Yeah, all I was saying was I think we're going to have to utilize some of the money from the Patreons to get you an autofocus lens.
I've got one. I'm just too lazy to use it.
Okay.
I've got one
Now-
literally right here somewhere in this room.
I've been in your broom closet. There's not a lot of room, so I don't know how you can understand losing anything in there.
The broom closet. I'm touching the walls right now.
Yeah, where's fucking Kevin the Gopher or whatever his name was?
Yeah, Gordon the Gopher.
Gordon the Gopher. Kevin was a rat, wasn't he?
Kevin was the rat, and then subsequently it was Duck, Ed the Duck.
Ed the Duck.
After
Yeah.
that.
Ed the Duck,
Yeah,
legendary. So yeah, I'm halfway through this beer, so can I talk about it?
No. Treggy, what are you drinking? No, I'm kidding, Chris. Go for it.
Fuck
Yeah,
off.
this is amazing. So
Fuck off.
Go on.
take your time.
This is an awkward silence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I will say about this beer is it is not your traditional hazy pale. Okay, so the can art's pretty cool. Actually, it's a bit of a wide boy on the front, which I think is awesome. And it says the Baller is super juicy and brewing with tropical fruit flavors, generously hopped with our favorite US varieties, brewed for celebrating life's wins, no matter how big or small. Now, my win today is the fact that what I have done is I went up to the loft and found that when they'd done the rewire, the electrician had taken all my boarding up from the loft. Okay. So I played jigsaw for about 25 minutes and managed to get all the boards back in the right place, screwed them all down, and now we can move everything back up into the loft that was already in the loft. So that's my small win for today. Hence, I'm drinking Baller. Now, this beer is not like your traditional hazy pale. Okay. A traditional hazy pale, you would expect a massive amount of fruit flavor with fairly minimal bitterness. This is a mid-coast, okay? I'm going to say this is a mid-coast. It's got a decent kick of bitterness, which, given I've been training my palate onto the West Coast recently, is very, very good. However, it has a wonderful, for want of a better term, mango and pineapple flavor which rolls over that bitterness, and you end up with what is essentially fruit juice in a glass. It's rather nice, I have to say. Very, very nice.
Decent.
Good, because I don't think you were overly impressed with some of the Gypsy Hill beers that you got, right?
No, some of them were shit.
Bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, very much. But it's what you expect is from Bruiser. I'm sure if I was to order from them
Well,
direct,
you get to pick the brewery though, Chris. So it's
I get to pick the brewery. I don't get to pick the beers.
That's
No,
true. That is true.
Well, yeah,
That's a fair statement.
I'll allow that. I'll allow that.
I mean,
You know.
but generally, my experience of Bruiser, don't run it down, is I think the brewery then does tend to box up the best of what they've got, not
Absolutely.
let's
Spread.
It's an excuse to get out the shit beer that we've
Yeah,
not
yeah.
sold from
No,
the cold room.
it's not beer 52.
No,
But at the same time, I don't think that if I'd have chosen the beers specifically off their website, which I will do,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to be honest with you, I will do for Gypsy Hill. I would have probably chosen different beers to what they sent. But their shortcake sour, the strawberry and I can't remember what it was, shortcake sour, was epic. Epic. It's such a great, great beer. I'm kind of gutted that I drank it the other night, to be fair. Because pulling that one out on the podcast would have been awesome. Awesome. It was a great beer. This one it's bitter but fruity. It's flavoursome, but at the same time, chilled. It's a good beer.
nice. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I will, if I see it in the shops, because you do tend to see Gypsy Hill. I tend to see Gypsy Hill out there quite a bit. I think they're really reasonably well distributed. They've been in the game quite a while, right?
Yeah, they're fairly well established in the few supermarkets and stuff, I think, as well, aren't they? So
yeah. I think if I see that one, then I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. I had a can of Jaipur earlier. Enjoyed that. That was good.
Jaipur is one of those beers
yeah.
that I never used to like very much, but recently I've been drinking it and it's been really ticking the old boxes.
Yeah, it's just really well balanced. I think
Thornbridge, isn't it?
Yeah, Thornbridge. It's not crazy hoppy, but it's really nicely balanced. It's just a very drinkable pale. I'm getting very middle-aged,
I think we're all developing. And one of the wonderful things I'm sorry to jump in before someone else does their beer, but one of the things that I have found about the podcast is we talk about all these beers and we talk about this and that and the other. And, you know, we tend to critique and go into the minutiae of each individual style. And I tend to be drawn toward, it's a good word, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, see, fucking hell.
Isn't it
all those years.
Minutiae.
Minutiae.
Minutiae. Minutiae.
I spent, I'm sorry, and anybody who knows me from anybody who knows me from my high school will attest to this. We had something called the CWW, which was a club that there were 4 members of. And what we used to do was look through dictionaries for obscure words that we could use. And CWW stands for the Crap Words Workshop.
Right.
Sounds wild.
You know how to live.
I'll be honest. I was 17 and angry at my parents. Cut me some slack.
Fair dues.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yep.
We've all been there. I mean,
Great beer.
Yeah. So you rebelled by heading deep into the dictionary.
I rebelled.
Rock and roll, man.
You really cut loose back in your teens, Chris.
I rebelled by learning words.
Rebel without a cause.
No. Hang on. I rebelled by learning words such as garrulous, verbose, and loquacious. All of which means
very good.
All 3 words mean the same thing, which is chatty. Yeah, there you go.
You learned the word verbose and lots of other words, so you could become more verbose. In fact,
exactly.
Yeah, gregarious.
Ironic.
Is that similar? Almost.
I thought gregarious was more of a personality kind of being giving.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, this is turning into like dictionary corner right now.
I'm gonna vape. You guys talk about beer.
Countdown.
It should be commercial. It's commercial corner, not dictionary corner. Trekkie, what are you drinking?
Right. So the Freeway Handshake is a 6.5% IPA, as we already mentioned. Rivington and Baron collabing with Verdant, and it's got their usual hop descriptors on the back. So we've got hot side Talus, cold side Citra, Brew One, Rawaka, and Eclipse. So a pretty bold combo of hops there. You can tell Baron have been involved with the old Eclipse. He was mentioning on the podcast about how he was trying to get that into every beer that he was making recently. So you got a couple of fairly big hitting Antipodean hops there with the Rawaka and the Eclipse, and then Citra and Brew One and Talus in the hot side as well. So and as you would expect, nice
fruit bomb,
nice hazy number in the glass. It's really dank, like aromatics. It's definitely got that like full on somebody smoking a massive bifter just down the road from you kind of aroma to it.
Tony when you need him.
Ginny on the bong again.
That's it.
She's just ripping a bong in the lounge.
Is this the beer or is that somebody smoking weed?
She's watching Family Guy.
Yeah, I can just hear this chuckling in the background. I don't know what's going on. Somebody's in the store. Anyway, so yeah, really like that like really dank sort of overripe tropical fruit thing going on. Then there's loads of limey kind of citrus stuff going on the nose. I think the Rawaka is definitely contributing quite a lot on the aroma. And yeah, flavor wise, similar thing really. Lots of lime. There's a bit of sort of a kind of tangerine, orangey type thing there. Nice lick of bitterness to it as well. It's really good. Yeah, very decent. Sometimes when you get these kind of like collaboration beers, they sort of maybe go a little bit too sort of divergent from what the individual breweries would normally put out. But I think based on what I tasted from Baron, and I mean I don't know too much about Rivington, but based on what we tasted from Baron and what I know about Verdant, that's kind of a nice combination of their ideas in that beer. It's quite nice. Yeah, definitely recommend getting that if you see it.
Nice. No, it's always good to try a beer, especially a three-way collab, and then try a beer that's not just muddled, but actually has some distinct ideas that represent each of the breweries and their styles. Yeah. So I'm drinking this this lime and berry sour ale, which is ever so slightly cloudy. It's an interesting sort of like very faint, sort of almost rosé pink color. Super. It's quite highly carbed, which I think matches the style, but it's a relatively kind of straight drinking, fruited sour. So it's not incredibly complex. You get a lactic, obviously quite a strong lactic kind of sourness to the beer. That berry note comes up front, and then the lime character that is probably more lime zest than lime juice carries it through to the end, and there's probably just enough bitterness. And in fact, that lime kind of zest thing adds to that bitterness piece that then just makes it quite drinkable. And it's pretty dry, so it's a very refreshing beer. Not a lot more to kind of say about that, to be honest. I think often those sort of fruited straight sours are just pretty much like, when made well, are exactly what they say on the tin. And you crack it open and it's refreshing and sour and goes down pretty quick. And yeah, it's a well-made sour. Well done. Buxton Brewery. Pass me the bong.
I have to say, yeah, that was Tricky's description of that beer made me immediately go to Spotify and play Hits from the Bong by Cypress Hill. It's just a fantastic
the fact
sort of
analogy. That song starts with like
yeah, the telltale bubbling.
It's brilliant.
Very good.
I think at the end of the Kolsch episode, as craft beer nerds, which let's face it, we are, there's nothing that we could have had that said, do you know what, we're going to rebel more than Tricky drinking a marijuana flavored beer, Owen nailing a sour, and me drinking something called, Baller, which is just
went a little bit off brand there.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've got a wonderful Helles lager in here from Gypsy Hill, which I'm holding back from drinking. So yeah, I just think that was a good end.
Cool. Shall we wrap it up then for this episode?
Shall we knock this one on the head? We can have a short, maybe an hour long after party on this one, I think. Once again, thank you for joining us. We've talked about Kolsch's until we're blue in the face, and I do believe that everybody out there should now be going and making a Kolsch. We've given you all the steps. We've given you the yeast to avoid. We've given you the temperatures to avoid. If you put in anything other than Pilsner or pale malt, and it has to be German pale malt, into your Kolsch, if you're not using Tettnang, which me and Tricky have both said does make a great Kolsch, then, you know, as long as you're using the right yeast strain. And as much as I want to bang on and I want to disrespect OYL's Kolsch 2 Omega yeast, I don't want to disrespect it because it did give a beautiful flavor. The clarity wasn't where I wanted it to be, but maybe that was something I did. I don't know. I just think that the Kolsch beer style is something that people should appreciate for what it is, which is a smashable beer. It is a very smashable beer. Admittedly, we're coming up to winter. Not a lot of people are going to be brewing Kolsch's right now, but just give it a go. Give it a go. There's nowhere to hide. It's going to tell you whether or not your brewing system's any good. It's going to tell you whether or not you're any good as a brewer. But at the same time, a wonderful beer, a great beer to drink, and a style that I'm quite excited and glad and appreciative that Owen suggested we talk about. And yeah, I fucking love Kolsch beers. I do. I think they're amazing.
Yeah, I think this conversation's inspired me to brew one.
I think you should.
Yeah, I'm going
I
to.
think you should too, Tricky.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've done a few over the years, but it's been a while, so it probably needs to be
likewise.
done.
Likewise, yeah. I'd like
You know what's going to happen now, don't
hand.
you? I think in 3 episodes' time, when we next record, sometime around about October, both Owen and Tricky are going to turn around and go, "Well, I'm drinking my Kolsch."
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen at the start of the podcast.
Like, ooh, look how clear my Kolsch is.
Yeah, because that is proper bragging rights, that, isn't it? Look at this. I can see my ugly face through it. Give it a go, guys. Kolsch's are a wonderful beer. And honestly, it's there's nowhere to hide. There really isn't. So thank you once again to Brewkeg Tap, Johnny at Brewkeg Tap, for everything that you need as far as dispensing goes, especially anything made by Kegland. It does some wonderful all-in-ones, and I do believe that the new all-rounder with the tri-clamp is going to be available pretty soon. I do remember seeing something about that. I'm hoping to get Johnny on the podcast within the next month.
The one you can turn into a giant bong. Just
literally a bong.
Off of the previous conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting your lighter on the bottom of your all-rounder. That's going to end badly. But it does literally look like a gigantic bong. So,
right. If you don't have a tri-clamp bong, like you've got.
Are you even trying, bro? Yeah, just turn a potato into a bong. Apparently, it's doable. Cheap and cheerful. So thanks very much to everybody. Thanks very much to our Patreons. You guys really do keep us going. Thanks to Brewkeg Tap for supporting us. Thanks to everybody who listens to us as well. We don't thank the listeners as much as we should. You guys enable us to keep doing this by listening to us, by paying attention to us, and by giving us your feedback. We have a Facebook group, we have an Instagram, we have our own website. Feel free to hit us up on any of those. Leave us a comment. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know what we're doing wrong, in your opinion. And we'll take everything on board and we will move forward. Big things are coming for the Hop Edition around about February half term. I can't announce it now because it's not been nailed down. But yeah, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And yeah, anything you guys want to say?
No.
This is what I love about my co-hosts. They're just silent. So thanks very much for listening. Episode 50, whatever this is, 5 in the bag. You 55. Can find us on all good podcasts in 35?
55.
Find us on every good podcasting platform. Subscribe to us on every good podcasting platform. And subscribe to us on YouTube. Let us know. And we will catch you guys later.
Night.
Good night.
Bon voyage.
Good night and God bless.
Ta-ta.
Sleep tight. Don't let the bugs bite.
Yeah, something like that. If you got bed bugs, you've got issues, haven't you? Really?
Bed bugs. No joke.
You remember? Did you read anything about that woman who had so many bed bugs that she basically died in her sleep because of them?
Really? Wow.
Nope,
That is
must have missed that one.
That's ignoring a problem.
Yeah,
That's not like just not realizing you had tuberculosis. That's
not messing around. That one, is it?
I've died of anemia because the bed bug sucked all the blood out of me. Is
okay.
Fun, yeah.
Guys, you guys on YouTube, you can still hear us. So what I'm going to say is that is the link to join the after party. The password is that. Hit us up, get on. We'll have a chat with you guys for a little bit. It's quite an early end for us. It's only 10:10. I need a piss. Feel free to join us on the after party thing. So yeah, there we go. Right, I need to close that window. I need to stop the stream. So hopefully you've all got the link, you've all got the password, and I'm going to end the stream. So we'll see you in the after party.